Hi, welcome to another episode of this combined vlog and podcast where I interview either media scholars from around the world whose work is cutting edge and fascinating and sheds light on our human condition in media. Or media professionals that do inspiring work in different parts of the world and different industries to chat about what it's like to make it work in the media industries. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Imogen Champagne from Sydney, Australia, and Sharid Alles, who's calling in from the Netherlands to my little studio here in the northeast of England. My name is Mark Deuze. I'm a professor of media studies at the University of Amsterdam. I'm the host of these gatherings. And my guest today, first and foremost, is Imogen. Imogen Champagne is a digital journalist and content producer. She's originally from Australia. And since 2021, she's an editor at Crikey, a news site in Australia. And before that, she was an audience engagement editor, the audience engagement editor at The Correspondent, the international startup news site linked to The Correspondent in the Netherlands, based out of the US. She managed communications at the Sydney Southeast Asia Centre. Before that, worked as a digital manager at an NGO called Sunset Cambodia, and also launched her very own startup called Impress Media in an attempt to develop people-powered journalism. She is on a mission to introduce the audience back into journalism, if you will, championing member-funded, reader-supported journalism and community-based journalism. My second guest is Sharid Alles. Sharid is a writer, a radio manager, producer, presenter from the Netherlands. She got her start as a web editor at the Animal Shine Group before moving to radio, working at the urban radio station Funx in the Netherlands. And after several stints as DJ, as presenter, as producer, working both on the microphone and behind the scenes, she ended up managing Funx, this public radio station for and about sort of urban youth in the Netherlands. She then became the manager of 3FM, one of the largest public radio stations in the Netherlands. And in the context of this all, she also published her first children's book called Rocca and the Secret Magic Recipe that appeared in 2018. Her commitment to team spirit, to making media very much in collaboration with and in close contact with the community it serves is at the heart of what Sharid does. And our conversation today really speaks to these kind of issues, to how do you make media while also really caring for and about your audience. How do you make it work in a emotionally charged environment, which the media industry is? How do you balance your own individual needs and desires and what you care about with those of your team and the group of people you're working with? And how do you balance between, on the one hand, doing what works best, and on the other hand, the need for constant innovation and change, which is so typical of what working in the media is really like. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I do, and please like, subscribe, leave a comment or ask a question, and I'm sure we'll be happy to get back to you in any shape or form. Welcome. Lovely to see both of you in the morning. And Imogen, what time is it? Is it in the evening for you now?
Yeah, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Okay. Well, thanks so much for taking the time early in the morning and early in the evening to talk about basically about yourself, which is nice, but specifically your work and your careers in various media in various parts of the world. To some extent, in the same part. I mean, you've both, of course, have lived and worked in the Netherlands, but also other parts of the world. So I would love to talk a little bit about that. And the theme sort of for us and the reason why I invited both of you for this chat is something that to me runs throughout your careers, which is sort of a real commitment, an explicit commitment to the audience in various shapes and forms, whether audiences as fans or as communities, as members, as participants. And I find this rare. I mean, a lot of times when you read the literature on the media industry or on media professionals, the audience is kind of an afterthought. It's imagined or it's datafied, right? The audience is a set of statistics, market shares, and those kind of things. And it's often even considered kind of not cool to even consider that when you're doing your thing, when you're making your program, you're setting up your site, you're writing your story. But for both of you, this is very different. I mean, Imogen, you started off with setting up a new company in press media that was all about sort of audience-powered journalism. And Sharid, I mean, for as long as I've known you, and at Funnex, at 3FM, and other ventures, you've always been really committed to building those bridges with the audience and addressing them not just as people that you deliver a product to, but very much as a community. Could you speak a little bit about where this sort of enthusiasm for the audience comes from, and how that has evolved during your careers? And Imogen, can I ask you to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess when you look back at my career so far, it does seem like I'm always committed to the audience. I guess I didn't notice that until this year. But I think it did start out with Impress, which was, you make it sound very exciting, like a business, but it was really just like going for it, failing fast, being like, wow, that was some great lessons, get out. But that really came about because I graduated in 2014. It was very clear at the time that ads weren't working in journalism, that we were going to need a new thing. And it was like, okay, obviously it's people paying for news. And it seemed so obvious to me that, like, well, if you want people to pay for news, then you're going to have to talk to them about it, and you're going to have to involve them in news, and you're going to have them participate in it and feel like you have some kind of ownership for it. And so what our plan was there was that we would, people would kind of become members of Impress, and some of them would then become writers. It would be like a user-generated platform, because of course I was at university in the time of like reading about, the people formerly known as the audience and all that kind of stuff. So that really stuck with me. And of course, when Impress failed, the good thing that came out of it was that I'd heard about the Correspondent and its launch in the US at the time. And when I started reading about what they were doing with their audience, how they were using them as sources and finding, professionals in there to talk about certain issues and crowdsourcing information, I got really excited about that, and just about how they, just about how much their members cared about what they were doing and how they were really part of it. Like, it was a membership to a club. And I think I learned a lot in my year and a half at the Correspondent, that when I got back to Australia and I realized no one was thinking about audiences, like, it had just started, but they weren't thinking about it in the same way that the Correspondent was, or even a bunch of platforms in the US, like, now just blanked on all the platforms in the US that are. But I just found Australia to be really far behind. And when I started talking about it to the people at Crikey, where I work now, they got really excited about it, about like, connecting with the audience and finding out who they are and finding out where they are and finding out what they want. So I think it's something that people in journalism really sometimes want to talk about. People that are into it are really into it, and people that are not into it, like you said, think it's very uncool. So it has been a constant battle of like the people that champion the audience against the people that don't give a crap about them and just want to write their stuff and get out and assume it's important.
Does that ring a bell for you, Sharid, in your work? I mean, you haven't been an audience engagement editor like Imogen, of course, has, but you know, as a station manager, as somebody who has been charged at various instances in lifting up a station and getting it more in people's minds and people to get people to enjoy it and tune in. I mean, I'm sure the audience has always been front of mind for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely, especially because radio, just like writing, is a very direct medium. I mean, in radio, you always talk to your audience in you just as one person instead of you as multiple persons. And that's because if you listen to radio, it feels like someone is talking to you alone, and not to the rest of the Netherlands or the rest of England or whatever. And I think you can only make good media productions if you know what your audience is like and if you know how to make a connection with them. And if you don't make that connection, then you're talking to yourself and not to your audience. And I think it just makes lousy radio, actually. So it happens. Sometimes I listen to radio and I'm like, you don't have a clue who you're talking to. It happens. And then when you talk to a radio presenter or to someone who's making a program, and they're like, okay, who's the person you're talking to? And they're like, person, yeah, but it's, and they're coming with the market share, so with everything. But you need to have a person in mind. You need to know who your audience is to make a connection, to make good radio.
So I mean, I guess the question then becomes like, how do we do this? Because on one hand, I can appreciate that some makers, some professionals would say like, well, if I, next to producing this thing, this story, this program, this show, also have to constantly consider the audience and imagine them, it's like too much, right? I just focus on the product, and which of course the result is you're making the show for your peers, for your colleagues, rather than for an audience. But if you switch that mindset, as both of you obviously are doing, to an audience, and knowing that audience and building some kind of relation with it, I mean, I can appreciate that takes an extraordinary amount of work, right? I mean, you can't, this doesn't happen overnight, and it's not just based on, well, 60% of my audience is below 30 years, so I'll cater my program to that. That's not what you're intending here either. I mean, you're both talking very much about a much more, I would almost say, social engagement with the audience. So how do we do that? Not just as a station or as a medium, but as an individual media professional. How do you sort of cultivate this notion of an audience that both of you are doing?
Yeah, for me, I've almost always worked for the youngster audience. So people between 15 and 35. Now I'm older than that, but I'm it's my favorite audience. I really love that audience because there's happening a lot in their lives at that moment. And anywhere between 15 and 25, you change so much, and so much stuff is happening, and you're shaping your own opinion about politics and about the relationship with your parents, and everything is shifting. And I really love that. So by now, I mean, I'm working now for 20 years, and I'm in the professional media. And so by now I know this audience pretty well. And if you have to, if you're working for that audience, my group of people, sorry, my English is redactie.
Oh yeah. Your team. Let's just say
my team. Let's put it like my team of editors and presenters and producers and everything. They're young as well, so I'm really close to them as well. And for some stuff, I'm just too old, and I know, and I don't get it. And I think, okay, why is this influencer interesting? I don't get it. But if you all say it's interesting, then it probably is. So let's go with it. So I think for me, the audience of young people has always been very close to me and has always felt like really close to me. And then you just have to keep up. And I really realized that there's going to be a moment that I'm really too old, that I don't keep up with it anymore. And then I have to change to an older audience probably.
Well, is it also, because one thing that always struck me about your work, Sharid, is that you combine, you know, making media, like, you know, a show, a program, or managing a station, with I would almost say non-media things, like, you know, festivals, live events, taking shows on the road. I mean, a very famous example is, of course, the Glass House of 3FM, which I'll explain at some other point, but these kind of things, I mean, that is very much a running thread, it seems to me, in your work. Is that also a way of connecting with an audience, of making the medium like real to a community?
Yeah, I really honestly believe that you have to be there where your audience is as well. So, and that's a discussion I sometimes had when I worked at 3FM, because I think, for example, for a young station, radio station, you have to be online there where your audience is as well. So online is as important as radio, as important as events. I mean, if our audience is loving festivals, like in at Phonics, the Summer Carnival, it's a big event in Rotterdam. Our audience loves it. Then, okay, let's make sure we're there as well. We know what's going on, and they see us as well. I mean, it's marketing as well, let's be honest.
Sure.
But it's also knowing what's going on within your audience. And I think you should always do that in events, but also online and also on radio. You should always know what's important and where they are.
Imogen, how does that work for you? I mean, like, how do you get to know your audience? How do you build relations? One thing I've seen you do in the past is like write explainers, like what can you do on this website? What can you do at our medium? Where can you find us? What like really, yeah, helping or almost instructing sort of the audience to get involved. Is that one of your techniques, or what are the other ways you're building these relations?
Yeah, definitely. So because I guess my audiences have always been purely online, like at the Correspondent, we were worldwide, and it was, I would have loved to go to a festival and meet these people. But yeah, we had to try to get everyone on the same page just on the website. And we did a lot of that through, you know, never assuming that everyone was already on the same page, explaining what we were about, trying to get people to talk to us. I mean, a lot of the stuff at the Correspondent we focused on was talk to us, tell us what you're interested in hearing, give questions to our correspondents, give questions to us. Do you want improvements? Do you hate it? Do you love it? And just like over communicating a lot, because for every time you send that out to 50,000 people, about 100 people will reply. And they're always the really enthusiastic ones that have a billion ideas, but you want to get the people that like aren't super engaged, that kind of are like, oh, I don't really know what you're about, but I want to know more, and then find out what they want from you. So I think that, the best way I've got of knowing my audience is asking them. And I think that's an underutilized thing in journalism, because a lot of traditional reporters and journalists kind of think they know, like you said, they're writing for their peers, they're writing for the people like them that they talk to. And sometimes just asking like a very simple question can kind of open your eyes about what the audience is actually interested in learning about, and what they don't know and what they do know.
What how does that work at Crikey? I mean, I always know Crikey as a kind of irreverent, I mean, I wouldn't say alternative, but sort of like it has its very own style in the way it reports. I mean, back in the day, I would always follow Crikey to learn more about the media industry, actually, rather than its all general news. It had that kind of in-crowd feel. Is that something that attracts you as well in working for a company like that?
No, it's actually something that unattracted me, that I didn't like about it, that it felt too in crowd. So I felt like, okay, you're writing for someone that's incredibly politically engaged. And there's a lot about Australian media. Like I'd read these articles and they'd be referencing like the opposition party in the 1980s. And I was like, who's getting this? But when I started working there, I realized that Crikey readers love that. Like they are there for that in-crowd feeling, and it's the people that were there for that, and they were getting what they wanted. And my challenge was to attract new people to Crikey that weren't there, but we could get there. So yeah, with Crikey, I found I don't need to ask people. Crikey readers will tell us if they hate something or if they love something. They're very opinionated. Where I do find myself asking more questions is on social media, where we're reaching new audiences. So I set up, and I didn't set up, it was already there, but I started using the Instagram for Crikey a lot more and asking questions, because I knew we were reaching people who had never heard of us, like younger people who had just come across us because their friends shared a post, and asking questions on there or on Twitter a bit more got me a lot different answers that I don't think our editorial team had ever considered about certain questions. Yeah. So with the Correspondent, everything was very on platform. With Crikey, it's very off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So pivoting a little bit to from audiences to you. I mean, both of you have had kind of exemplary careers, if you will, when it comes to the careers of media professionals. In that, I mean, it's both consistent, like, you know, great resumes, did some wonderful work along the way, and at the same time, all over the place. I mean, in the case of Imogen, quite literally all over the place. Like you moved to the UK, to Australia, to the Netherlands. So that's quite a trajectory there. And Sharid, I mean, you worked online, you worked for different radio stations, different public broadcasters, managed a station, 2 stations. And wrote a lovely children's book along the way as well. And to me, so that's very much, you know, when students ask me like, oh, what do I need to know in order to get a career in the media as well? I try to tell them stories like yours, like it's all over the place, and just enjoy the ride. Now that is also a bit too easy, right? If I say that, just enjoy the ride. I'm sure it sometimes maybe doesn't feel like a ride, and you're making constant decisions along the way that I guess like you couldn't have predicted. Like you couldn't have predicted, well, if I do this and this and this, then this will happen next. Like, well, that's generally not how it works. So I would love to hear from you. So how do you look back at those decisions? Like, how do you make the right decisions along the way? How do you say yes or perhaps no to opportunities that come along? And if you look back, like what were the key influences in those decisions? Who wants to kick it? Sharid, you want to start?
Yeah, it's okay. I think for me, I did an education where I learned how to write. It was something like journalism. It had journalism parts in it, but it was really mostly writing, because I wanted to write children's book later when I was grown up, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I, after 2 years after my education, after I got my diploma, I there started this new radio station, Phonics, and it was completely new, and it had this new audience only in the 4 big cities of the Netherlands. And I decided to apply there because I thought, well, it might be fun. It was really like that. It was nothing more. I just thought it might be fun. And I was a bit bored by writing for the internet, because back in the day, I mean, I'm talking 2001, 2002, internet wasn't the way it is right now. Nobody had smartphones. We didn't have social media. I mean, it was completely different. I was a bit bored, and I wanted to try to work at the radio station, actually behind the scenes, but they offered me a job. I started there, and within a couple of months, they offered me a job as a presenter, a host. And I've been hosting radio programs for 4 years. And for me, it's always been, if I think it feels right and maybe I can do it, then I might as well try. And I think that's always been the attitude I had towards my career. I never thought in a career like, once I want to manage a radio station. I never thought of that. never
Right.
ever. And I've just been making radio programs, and after a while I just thought, okay, I'm done at Phonics and I want something else. And I started at the Radio 1, the news station in Netherlands, public news station, but as an editor. And then I started presenting again. So everything just sort of happened. The only things I've really, the real moments I've been deciding some stuff is in, I think, 2015. I quit being a radio producer. I didn't present anymore already a long time because I just wasn't that much into it. I didn't like it that much. I loved working behind the scenes more than in front of scenes. And I decided I really wanted to do something else. And then Phonics came along, and somebody already asked me a couple of years before if I wanted to be the manager of Phonics, and then I said no. And then in 2015, I decided to give it a go, and I got a job. And 3 years later, I was asked to be the station manager of 3FM, which is a pretty big radio station, and it was in a lot of damage had been done at the station, so it was quite a mess when they asked me to do it. And I've been really thinking a lot about that. And I have to say, the things that I didn't like about the job were the fact that it was so public and that there was so much going on, and that so many people in the Netherlands had an opinion about it. I didn't like it, but I was also like, okay, let's give it a go. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah.
And 3 years later, well, almost 4 years later, I decided to quit my job. And now I'm in between jobs, or having a sabbatical, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm not working at the moment because I quit my job at 3FM because it felt right to do. And that sounds really blah, blah, like, okay, when does it feel right? But you just have to think for yourself, does it make me happy? Is it gonna make my work more interesting or less interesting? Only getting bigger or more high up the rank, I think that's not what it's about. It's just about enjoying what you're doing and having fun and learning, and get the best out of it and out of yourself.
Interesting. I mean, it reminds me a little bit about something I read the other day from some, I don't know what it was, a column writer or a guru or a coach, I don't know, but he made the argument that when you make decisions, stop thinking about whether they're the right or the wrong decision for you, but thinking about it in terms whether they enlarge your world or make your world smaller.
Exactly.
And that seems very much what you're saying.
And I want to say, put extra in it. Like I said, I just quit my job as a station manager at 3FM, which is considered in the Dutch media world a pretty big job. And I quit my job. And why? Because it didn't make me happy anymore. Really, it didn't really make me happy anymore, because I'm missing. I was only being a manager. I was not making media anymore. I was just in meetings and doing boring stuff about budgets and stuff like that. So I decided to quit my job. And a lot of people say, you're crazy. And I'm like, something else is going to come up. It's going to happen again.
Right. Yeah. Imogen, how do you reflect on these kind of decisions in your path?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Sharid was saying about sometimes you just know when it feels right. So, I mean, I studied journalism at university, and I was very idealistic, but by the time I got to the end of university, I was also very realistic, and I knew that in Australia there's about 20 cadetships. I knew that I wasn't in the top 20 in my year, so there was only a couple of organizations I wanted to work for, and I was just like, oh, that's it, I don't really need to be a journalist. And I started working as a digital manager at an NGO, where funnily enough, I learned the basics of like all the skills that I use today. I learned writing and like knowing your audience and basic graphic design and all that stuff. But in my head, I turned away from journalism. It wasn't happening. But then I kept thinking about it. I kept thinking about why I didn't want to work in Australian journalism. And that's when I started Impress, because it was trying to fix the things that I hated about it. And like I said earlier, even though that failed, I found out about the Correspondent. And so 2 years later, when I found myself I'd quit a very good job in Sydney because I was a little bit bored, and I moved to Europe with my partner, and we were on a train in Russia, and I got an email from the Correspondent that was like, "We're launching, apply for jobs here." And then my Wi-Fi cut out, and I had 16 hours without Wi-Fi to fill in the application. And I did. And so at this time, I hadn't worked in journalism. I'd worked in communications, and I thought, what the hell? I'll just give it a shot. And then I didn't hear back from them for ages. I was living in London. I was working this terrible, terrible job. And then I got I got invited to interview, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea, and I moved to Amsterdam. And this was like, I was so lucky. I'd thought a lot about journalism, and I had a lot of thoughts about journalism and a lot of opinions, but I never worked in it. And that was just honestly pure chance. You see like dream job adverts come up a lot, but you don't apply for them because you're not on a train with nothing else to do. You're leading a busy life. And so that was just a pure chancing, and that I'd, I guess, known myself enough to leave my very comfortable job in Sydney when I did, because I knew that although I liked it and I liked the team and it was good pay, it was close to my home, which is very important to me. It wasn't something that I wanted to be doing in 5 years, so I knew that I had to make the change now. And yeah, and then that kind of seemed to set me up a little bit then. Like when I came back to Australia, I knew what I thought Australian media were missing, and I felt like now I actually had the skills to do something about it, whereas 6 years earlier, when I was very young and very inexperienced, I had a lot of thoughts and not a lot of skills. Yeah, so it really is a kind of, looking back, it all makes sense, but looking forward, I would never have planned that route for myself.
So one thing I'm picking up, and maybe I'm overreaching here from both your stories, is an interesting combination, right? You both talk about chance, right? Things come along the way, but to appreciate chance means you have to have an open heart, right? A curiosity is sort of like a willingness to change. I mean, these are all kinds of personality characteristics and a mindset, a way of being in life, like, open, like, oh, let's see what happens next. Like you said, Sharid, I mean, let's just give this a try. And like you, Imogen, let's just, I know myself enough to be able to be strong enough to say, I'm going to move to the UK, I'm going to move to the Netherlands, I'm going to go on a train to Russia. So there's that open heart element. Then the second element that I'm hearing is very much about knowing yourself, like know what makes you happy, know what you like, what you don't like, and of course finding that out along the way. I mean, this is not like a stable thing, of course, but still, I mean, having that sense of reflection about yourself and your own needs and what makes you happy. And then the third element, I think that ties the previous two together, is feels. It feels right. It makes me happy. Those kind of things. And I would like to, if you forgive me, probe a little bit deeper on the notion of feelings. I mean, to work in the media is obviously an emotional roller coaster, right? I mean, you're working generally with people that all really care about what they do. I mean, there's very few people who want to work in the media to make lots of money and have a stable job and pension plan and good dental. It's like most people love to tell stories and they're committed to their work. They consider whatever they're doing their little baby. And so it's a lot of intense emotions. That's in part what makes the work so lovely. But also there's darker parts of that. I mean, tensions can run high. People can be, not so nice to work with. There's a lot of calibration that you have to do, your own involvement. And then when something fails or you get rejected, that I'm imagining that feels very personal. Like if you're very emotionally engaged with your work, that also makes you vulnerable. So can you tell us a little bit more, if you feel comfortable, about how do you manage your emotions in your career? Like, how do you deal with that? I mean, it's one thing to say, like, I'm open to chance and I do what feels right, but I mean, emotions play a part in everything you do, especially in the media. So I can imagine that requires a certain way of handling them. But how does that work for you?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Well, what I wanted to add earlier is, and it always feels a bit blah blah, but you really have to stay close to yourself. And if you're very adventurous, like Imogen, like traveling all over the world to get to do nice stuff and go everywhere, then that's what you should do. But if for me, deciding not to be a presenter anymore and work behind the scenes, deciding to quit my job, it's also just staying close to what you really want, and not only to what people expect you to do or what the world around you considers to be right for you, And I know that's much easier to say when you're in your 40s than when you're in your 20s, because when you're, I always notice when I talk to my team, which are very young people most of the time in their 20s, like, okay, I know this is a crazy question, but where do you want to be in 5 years? And they look at you like you ask them, where do you want to be when you die? When you're 80 something, because 5 years from now, it feels like eternity. And for me, 5 years is absolutely nothing. So I think if you're happy with not being so adventurous, or not going for the highest position, or not being famous, or whatever, then it's okay as well. Just stay close to yourself. And if you are more adventurous, then also stay close to yourself. Don't do stuff which you might later regret. Be nasty to people to get the better position, or to it sounds very easy and very like, yeah, duh, but I mean, I've been working in media now for more than 20 years, and I know there are a lot of people who are doing stuff like that to get the better job, or to get a show to present, or to work behind the scenes, and just backstabbing or doing nasty stuff. Just don't do it. Just stay close to yourself. It's a small world, at least in the Netherlands it is. It's a small group of people who's working there. So make sure you're doing it on the right way for yourself and for the people around you.
Imogen, what does this mean to you? Your emotional calibration or navigation of this kind of work?
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that I've quite worked out yet, to be honest, because I think, as you said, I think when you're doing work that you find really meaningful, you do really love it, and you do want to get a lot of meaning out of it. But at the same time, this is about to turn a little bit dark, but at the same time, most media organizations are businesses, and they're there to make money. And there was that book, Your Work Won't Love You Back. And I think, as much as I think a lot of people find a lot of meaning in media, it's still a business. And like, as we learned at the Correspondent, if it's not making money, all the employees go. I came back to Australia and I met this amazing woman who gave me loads of advice, and she was like, "Oh, you were only made redundant once. We don't even call ourselves journalists here until we're made redundant twice." I was just like, "Oh, this is horrible." So I think that was a really big learning curve for me, because I was absolutely like emotionally devastated after losing the meaningful work of the Correspondent. And it took me a really long time to recover from that. And even when I first started at my new job, I was very distanced, I think. I didn't really want to care about it that much. But I think it's just kind of learning to care enough, and learning that it's not everything. I had an ex-colleague who, when I made a mistake or didn't get something done, she would say, "Oh no, did someone die?" And I'd say, "No, of course not." And she's like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter." And that's very true. Like it's a big learning curve of learning when is enough to care.
It's just media. I used to say, when I was a manager at Phonics, I had a few mantras I would say to the people there, and I heard just 2 days ago that they're still using it. I would always say when somebody was, can I swear or not? Yeah, when someone fucked up an item and they were really devastated about it. And I was like, okay, did someone die? No, we're not trying to invent medicine against Ebola. So just chill. It's not like we're doing something to save the world or save the planet. We're just making media. Chill.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it means everything and it means nothing at the same time. Yeah, yeah, that's I think that's sort of the summary of how to balance things. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. But still, would you, because this caring about the work, right? And like, oh, I made a typo in the story and it went online, and oh my God, and yes, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit drama, and it's perhaps not necessary, and you do have to calibrate that. On the other hand, and I don't know if you agree or whether you feel differently about this, I can appreciate that exactly that kind of emotional investment is what makes the work meaningful, right? Is that the fact that you are surrounded by people that really care, and so if you sort of become a bit more grounded, which emotionally seems very healthy, does that take away some of the fun, or actually quite the opposite? It makes the work more fun because you can step away from it. Is that, am I hearing it correctly?
I think it's knowing when to step back and knowing when to go forward, because I mean, in journalism, there's like, we have an election coming up. Everyone knows that we're going to be working crazy hours round the clock, but
Right.
It's having the emotional intelligence to say, when nothing's on, clock off as early as possible, and everyone's okay with that. You know, like everyone is pretty good about that. If it's a low week, clock off. But when something matters, it really matters. And I think having a really kind of cohesive mission in a team helps with that, because you know where your priorities are, and you know when you should be putting your energy in, and you know when you can take a step back and kind of let it go to the keeper and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, sometimes you just have to work really hard, very long hours, sometimes it's just tough, but I have to say honestly that I like it when it's like that, when we're having a big event, or like the glass house, which you are gonna explain later.
Yes.
It's a big event, and last December we did it, and on the first day of our event, the government changed the lockdown rules completely, so we had to change everything while we were already in our week-long event. I mean, that's stressful. And then everybody is working around the clock to make it happen. But still, nobody is dying when we do something wrong. And I think you should always get that balance, keep that balance in your head.
Yeah.
It's important to do your best, but more than the best, it's not possible.
So to continue and to conclude our conversations, I want to keep going at that notion of balance, but not so much regarding emotional investment and those kind of things, but regarding innovation and change. I mean, because both of you are part of and have pushed in your various positions at Funx, at 3FM, of course, in press, the short-lived but great experiment, Imogen, of course, the correspondent, and like you just explained, what you're doing at Crikey, innovations in making media, in trying out new things, new formats, new ways of engaging the audience, new profiles, I mean, all kinds of new things. Now, the story of the media industry is very much that story of, on the one hand, sticking to what works and very much, you know, routine-based sort of production pipelines with set deadlines and formats and those kind of things. And on the other hand, this need to constantly change, to never do the same thing twice, to innovate. Partly because changing technologies, changing audiences, but also partly simply because of the kind of people media professionals are. They want to make cool new things. They don't want to just copy paste whatever the guy or girl did before them. And since you've both been at the forefront of innovation throughout your careers, like what does innovation and being innovative mean to you? And how do you navigate and strike a balance, if you will, between, you know, do what's tried and tested, and at the same time change everything. How do you achieve that balance? How do you manage that for yourself and perhaps for the companies you work for? And what does innovation mean to you? Imogen, maybe I can ask you to start us off.
Yeah, sure. This is maybe not a very good answer and probably not one that I'd like other people to mimic, but I've always been blessed with a colleague who is very good at organizing. So I've always liked to go out and do stuff. And I've always had people around me that are very good at being like, cataloging all the data, this worked, this didn't work, this is what you should do next time. That was terrible, please never do that again. This is not just in media, it's in all jobs. I don't know how I've got so lucky, but I think if you get a team where people support each other's strengths, if some people is smashing and breaking things and the other people is cleaning it up and putting it into order, then that can work really well. I don't know how I'd do it without people like that, basically. And I've been very lucky. I think you have to get the basics down. I think at Crikey, we have to put out a set amount of articles a day. We have to put it out in a newsletter. We have to put it out before 1 p.m. You've got to have that down. Like, that's got to happen. And then anything else on top of that, I think, is kind of fair game. And because it's such a fast moving environment, there's a lot of appreciation for innovation, but only if it works. But there's also a growing appreciation for failure and understanding that just because something failed, it doesn't mean that it sucked. It means that we shouldn't try that again, and that's good to know. So I think that is changing, and I think that recognizing when something sucked and we can mark it down as bad idea is a really useful thing, because I think a lot of people don't do that. They keep, not that you should just bin everything that doesn't work, but work out what doesn't work and what does and try it again. And I think having an environment where everyone knows that failure is a very frequent option can really help with that. Yeah. But again, it is about the balance, because you can't always be innovating. You need to go have a big crack, fail, cry a little bit, take some time out, come back and try again. I think as long as you can keep yourself in check over that, then that works quite well.
I love the idea that failure is becoming more acceptable. Some things fail. Let's just benchmark it and understand it and try something else or try again. Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
It's this funny, I think it's something that I realized sometime at the start of last year, that something that journalists, funnily enough, tell themselves is like, oh, it's only the internet. Like 10 years ago, you know, it was, the whole saying was like, today's front page, tomorrow's fish wrap or whatever. Whereas now people go like, it's not even that. It won't even be there tomorrow, which is funny, because it's like, this is what we do, guys. Like, we do stuff on the internet, but at the same time, it can be huge, and it can also be forgotten really quickly. And that's humbling and a blessing.
Yeah, it's very similar, Sharid, to what you're saying. It's just making media, right?
It's making media, and people are talking about it today, and then tomorrow everybody's done again, especially in this time. I think in this era where everything is just going so fast, and from hype to another hype. About innovation, I think I sometimes want to be a bit too much innovative. For the places where I've been. I mean, radio can be quite, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to say a Dutch word again because I don't know the English word, behoudend.
Oh, but a little bit conservative, perhaps?
Conservative, yeah. That's the word. A bit conservative sometimes. And especially for young people, I think you should always try to be trying new things. And exactly like you were saying, if you fail, then you fail, and then you know. And sometimes failure isn't bad. Sometimes you need to try stuff a couple of times before it starts to work. So yeah, I think it's always good to have an open mind and to keep pushing people around you. And I'm absolutely sure that you can only do it with the right people around you. So you need to have people who are very creative, too creative, actually, that they are like, I've once been in a meeting about changing the studio of 3FM and maybe moving to a different part in the building and then changing the studio. And I put some radio DJs with each other, with the technical people, and I was there as well. And it was so funny because within 5 minutes they were talking about a helicopter platform on top of the roof and the logo of 3FM on top of the roof, which you could see with a drone and everything. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense, but it's always good to have people who think so wild and so big, and then, you know, narrow it down a bit. And I'm always in between. I'm sometimes the person who thinks too big, and sometimes I'm the person who narrows stuff down, and sometimes I'm the person who organizes everything. And I'm always sort of in between, but I love to change stuff and come up with new ideas. But sometimes at radio, it just doesn't work because people are a bit conservative.
In conclusion, maybe very brief final, I'm taking a lot of your time. Again, thank you so much. But one thing that I picked up throughout our conversation today is how much both of you talk about the people around you. Your team, like Imogen, what you said, you know, there's somebody next to you who's really organized, which kind of allows you to be disorganized, and together you strike a balance and able to move forward. I mean, Sharid, you've talked about your team many, many times, and the teams you've worked with or worked for, or that you managed. This significance of being part of a group. Maybe one or two final thoughts of both of you I would really appreciate, because in talking with media professionals often, or when people consider careers in the media, they often think about just themselves, right? Like, what do I want? What do I need? What do I want to do? And part of our conversation today was very much about this too. Like, you get to know yourself, what makes you happy and all that kind of stuff. But the reality of making media and working in media is often being part of a team. I mean, you're actually not on your own at all. Like quite physically, like almost nobody has their own office. Right? Like, you're part of a group, and that group is really, really significant. No matter how short-lived perhaps your career with that group is. Can you say one or two things finally about what that means of being part of a team, and it's not all about you, and how that perhaps is both a wonderful aspect, but sometimes perhaps also a difficult aspect to manage as somebody who works in the media?
Well, for the last years, I've been managing radio stations for the last 7 years. And I know that your team is key to everything. And it takes a lot of time to build a good team. It takes 2-3 years to get your team the way you want it. And history tells that when I have a good team, I'm leaving myself. So, but it's really so important to have the right dynamics and have the right people with the right skills together. If you only have very creative people, then you're not coming anywhere, because they will only think very creative, but they won't get anything done. So you need to have people with organizing skills and people with a bit boring people. You need them as well, you know, because they just make the work done, and that's what you need. And so and besides that, and that's something that COVID-19 really messed up, one of the reasons why I quit my job was because I missed my team so much, because we were all working from home. I'm working with a lot of young people. Normally I had my own office at the office, and they would just barge in all day and telling me, Sharid, I have this idea or that idea, and what do you think? Or just making fun and just cracking some jokes, and that's it. But your team, if you have the right amount of people and the right people together, then you can really lift each other up. But then you have to be good for each other. Sometimes be a bit competitive, but most of the time supportive to each other. And I think that really, then you can really get something done.
Imogen, how is that for you, the team spirit?
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think that's very important. I think that it is, I think it's underestimated how much it's not the individual people in the team, it's how the team works together and how they push each other up. And support each other when they're not doing that well, because you are kind of, yeah, it doesn't work if there's one person streaming along in this way and everyone's going in a different direction. It really needs to be working together. And yeah, that kind of cohesiveness is very important. And I think that that good managers play a really good part in that when they're good, and a really devastating part in that when they're not good. And I think in media, I'm sure this is not the case for you, but often the managing skills can really be overlooked. And I wish all media places would spend more time on that, because yeah, like creating an environment where people feel comfortable to barge in and make jokes and give ideas and feel like they're always listened to is really important, because once the culture starts to shrivel a little bit, it's really, really hard to get it back, and it can just plummet very, very quickly. And then you're left with a very environment.
Well,
doesn't know to end. But good teams are fantastic.
Yeah, that's the difference that it really makes. For what it's worth, I think we've made a really lovely team today. I really appreciate your honesty and obviously your time. So thanks so much for participating in this, for doing this, and please keep doing amazing work. Sharid, is there a new book on the horizon, perhaps?
Yes, very soon. Very soon. I'm writing. I'm finishing it this month, so it's gonna come out in May.
Fabulous.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. and Imogen, all the best with the upcoming election. So much is riding on this. I mean, Australian politics has made headlines around the world for various reasons.
None of them good, I'm sure. Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting time.
So we'll be checking in regularly. And again, all the best to both of you, and thanks again for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.